Good morning. Welcome to our October 3rd Thursday IHE Lunch and Learn. We are honored today to have Micah Huyser with us, who is the executive director of the Nebraska Prairie Museum. And we'd like to thank the Nebraska Jewish Historical Society, who brought all this together with the art exhibit of Thomas Nagel. And so I'm going to turn it over to our speaker now, and who will go into much further detail of this amazing exhibit. If you haven't seen it yet, it is up now to the end of the month here at the Jewish Community Center, and I highly encourage you to see it. But let me turn it over. So please, at your leisure, Micah.
I think I've got it unmuted. Everybody can see the screen okay? Okay, sweet. So this is our website here. I'm Micah. I'm the director at the Nebraska Prairie Museum. We have a fairly large museum for central Nebraska. We cover a lot of history in that area, and I've been the director since 2019, and it's been fun. It's been a handful. It's been a lot of things going on, and recently, Scott said, we've branched out and we're taking some of our content on the road, and that'll be at the JFO for the next probably 2 weeks from now. And so please check that out while you can, or, oh, shucks, you have to come visit us. So either way, it's great to have everybody on here. Again, we're located north of Holdrege, Nebraska. So here's a little picture of the museum there that we have. Our website is a really cool thing, just talking about different exhibits, Stereoscope, which is our newsletter, stuff like that. So check that out at your leisure, and I'll get things started. So the main lecture I'm going to be giving today is talking about just the Camp Atlanta prisoner of war camp situation, how it happened, the history of it. Talk generally, but also it's a niche area of history that not a lot of people think about when they're covering history, especially like I'll talk to World War historians that just love talking about World War II and just World War I and American history, and they don't even know this happened. And so first off, the really big thing to think about is that no matter what war throughout history, there is always going to exist POWs. A historian said that during World War II, about 1 in 6 combatants, or meaning six out of 10 combatants are going to become a POW. So that means that if you have a platoon of 1,000, you're taking in 600 POWs after whatever skirmish, which is kind of crazy to think about. Just the logistics of, okay, are these guys wounded? Are they starved? Or what are they? Are they obviously they were just shooting at you a moment ago. Now they're your prisoner. What do you do? That's big things, big things to think about. Well, so this happened, especially in England at the time. They really had a lot of their infrastructure destroyed during the Blitz, and they had a hard time keeping track of some of the POWs they had there. That let alone when the Allies ship entered into World War II, or America entered into the Allies ship of World War II, they all of a sudden needed to come up with the logistics of how do we process all of these POWs. We don't have any mainland camps to have as bases of operations in Europe at the time. And so they had them to ship out this way. So pretty much as soon as America entered into World War II, they already had POWs sent on their way to the US. And so that caused the Army Corps of Engineers to really start to be like, okay, what do we do? So the camp system itself was really built to just have a house for some of these POWs. But when the Army Corps of Engineers were really tasked with this project, they looked at, well, currently we have a labor shortage in the Midwest because of the draft. And so we want to try and shore up some of those labor shortages in agricultural production, while at the same time, they kind of strategically placed these camps really far away from anything. Atlanta, Nebraska is a town. It is maybe 200 people, and it's about 5 miles away from Holdrege, Nebraska. And when this is one of this camp began to bloom out, there were at Camp Atlanta, the maximum amount of POWs that they had was about 3,000 there, but they had 18 satellite camps that I'll get to later. There was about 200 buildings in total. And it's kind of hard to make out, but there's right in the middle, there's a guard tower, and then there's a little chimney right in the middle of that. That is one where that's the chimney of where the boiler was. And so they had 11 of the buildings, which was mainly the officers. They had the luxury of having steam heated buildings in the winter, but mainly the infirmary too. The infirmary has about 165-ish at one point, but uh, funnily enough, so like the very first troops that came off the train. So here you are, you're a German POW. You get on a boat for 3 days in this whatever clothes they gave you there, or whatever clothes you were wearing at the time, which could be muddy, bloody, or whatever. Ship you on a boat. You get to the U.S. You spend about another 3 days on train, and then you come out smelling, I'm sure, wonderful. And then they say, okay, now get to work. You're going to build your house that you're going to live in for the next couple years. And so the Army Corps of Engineers based the camps off of the existing barracks. So this was very similarly built and constructed quickly, cheaply, and what the architecture of it was based off of the other existing American bases. What makes and I get some people that guests that come out to the museum that try to make parallels between Japanese internment camps. And the biggest difference is internment camps were really focused on small family units. And so they tried to keep the families into separate houses because they had women and children and elderly. And so where this is just men, German captured men from Europe, they could put them into single block style barracks. Although the main difference between a U.S. base and this is the 3 layers of barbed wire fence. That's a little bit of a difference. um, and so here's an aerial view. It's not the best, but you can kind of see just the scale of of it all. Of all the different barracks out in a row. And this is the isometric. This is a really good one to go off of. So you have on the bottom left, you have the receiving cell blocks. That was for the guys that first got in, and then they would go to either cells 1 or grounds 1, 2, or 3. And then everything outside of it is the garrison. There was for Camp Atlanta alone, there was about 600 employees, and that were either paid civilian contractors, or they were officers or guards, etc. And so that they were housed outside of the camp for the most part. Heating, if you weren't luxury of having the 11 buildings that were steam powered, the barracks themselves had wood-fired stoves in each of the barracks. Um, there's another good layout of it. So the camp itself was in every respect of the guard, it was a prison. Although a lot of the times, it would have been familiar to a soldier. This is not too dissimilar to the German barracks or anywhere else. So it was made that way to feel familiar to the inhabitants of it. And throughout this camp system here's some of the guards. I love the little pipe. Oh, that's great. And so the prisoners here so here, the other reason why everything was built in such a hurry is because as soon as the United States entered into the allyship of World War II, they knew they already had this bravados of, okay, we're going to enter, war's going to be over, so don't go and spend too much money on this because it's going to be over soon. Well, that's also the intentions that they had when they were working with the POWs. They worked with them, and very similar. They worked with them okay, backing up. They wanted to treat them well. This wasn't a lot of the times when we think of POW camps, it's usually like deplorable conditions, stale rations, or different things. Funnily enough, the Germans complained that the Americans are too well fed, that they are feeding us more than what we've ate in Germany, that the American foods are too rich and too full of diet. Well, that was, again, just the food itself was a good example of what America was trying to do. They were showing these POWs, these Germans, that America is a very wealthy country. America is a very prosperous, well-to-do country, and American-style democracy is the way that you can make that happen. And so that was one of the leading factors for why they wanted these POWs here, was because they wanted to project that an American-style democratic system is the best way to govern. And so take that life lesson with you back home to Germany. And so they had the incentive to treat them well, to treat them with respect. They gave them jobs throughout. And so these are some of the line cooks. And they had everything. They had an altar. They had a theater group. I always loved showing the lavatories. You can tell there's a bunch of guys. This isn't, there's no families or anything. But the other side is that, they were used as labor. And when we think labor, it's usually like, oh, it's conscripted forced labor. And that was not the case. They were paid. They were, funnily enough, the farmer family could say, hey, we are struggling to get this year's harvest out. And so they put an application to the United States Department of Agriculture, which would then put a response over to the United States Army, which would then send it to the camps. And so they would actually have these as volunteers. They could volunteer to get out there and work, which a lot of them wanted to. The tedium, the sitting inside of your bunk all day, every day. A lot of them wanted to get out. They wanted to see America, funnily enough, too. And a lot of them in their past life, when they were in Germany, they were agricultural workers. They wanted to get back to what they know and get away from war life. And so it's escapism in a way. And so they went out, so they could only travel so many days out from Camp Atlanta to service some of the farms, and they were paid to do so. It was in script currency, so like it was little tokens in a way, and you could exchange those at the camp store. Now, of course, they couldn't be paid in the United States like dollars and cents. Eventually they might be able to save up some money, do something stupid like bribe a guard or something like that. So they're paid in a Camp Atlanta script currency. And there they could buy anything from Coca-Cola, candy, carving knives, for like wood tools, paint supplies. We have a number of paintings that were done by prisoners while they were at the camp. And they had instruments that were donated by the YMCA, Red Cross, and some local people. And so it was incentivized to work, to contribute, but they were paid. And they could even buy low APV beer, funnily enough, because everybody knows proud Germans love their beer. And so that was very part of that culture. What they recognized that it was over the years is over the months, was some of these more remote farms, by the time they would get everybody loaded, even if it was like bright before the sun's up, get everybody loaded, get everybody out to this farm, they only had probably about 1 or 2 hours of daylight left. And so they created a system of branch camps. And so Camp Atlanta, there's the big orange dot. So Camp Atlanta oversaw 18 satellite camps. This was kind of the case throughout the U.S. 32 states, I think 32 states had German captured POW camps within their borders. And so Camp Atlanta worked with most of Nebraska, South Central Nebraska, and then Camp Concordia in Kansas had the other parts of Kansas. And so these different branch camps could house anywhere from 100 to 250 POWs at once, and they would just have a 3-day on, 4-day off shift where they would ship them up. They'd stay at the branch camp. They'd have enough supplies and everything to last them that bit. They'd service the farms in the area, and then they'd send them back and then send the next troop up. So they would just rotate these guys throughout the areas. Camp Indianola was the other main camp outside of Camp Atlanta. They kind of went back and forth as far as which camp had the most POWs at one given point. Thomas Nagley did most of his time spent during as an interpreter at Camp Indianola. Overall, the Atlanta camp system oversaw 100,000 POWs. Of the 371,000 POWs that entered into the United States during World War II. So about a little under a third of all of the POWs were through the Camp Atlanta system. And so, yeah, so that kind of gives you a little perspective of the just sheer number and logistics of housing and working with that many people at once. And so that then continued on. This is copies of those scripts that I was talking about. So they were paid in these. It was equivalent, it worked for the time. And again, like I said, they were happy to do so. They were incentivized to do so. There was an instance where one of these branch camps, uh, two of the POWs escaped once, and they went out running in a direction, expecting to eventually hit a coast. So they thought that they were looking at the idea of in a European mindset that they could just start running in a direction and hit a major city or a major coast or something so they could get away. They came back 2 days later, absolutely exhausted, dehydrated, starved, and they actually had to go to the infirmary for 2 weeks to recover. So definitely part of the system there. It was really incentivized too to build up a culture here with Atlanta. So this is their stage, their theater that they did performing arts in. They had theater groups, they had musician groups, they did movies. This is kind of and it was also a way to um, yeah, they had their own like newspaper or different things like that. It was just a way that they could educate and bring in a lot of these German POWs, and of course, notice the bright American flags right next to their stage. So it is again a way to say that you're here. There was here's some of the troops that performed. Like I said, they could get anything. That I found out later that dog is called Schnitzel. And it was a camp mascot. It was one of the officers' dogs, and it just got out and went home with the officer. But the POWs and everybody loved him. And I love you can see in the hand of the gentleman on the far right, holding a cigar. Like it is very much they had a lot of privileges in that, despite being POWs. Um, of course, it's an all men's troop. So they went a little bit, if you know, little Romeo and Juliet and that, a little Shakespearean, if you know your Shakespeare history. Um, and then, of course, these guys are coming from, this was everybody. They had musicians that were conscripted during World War II. They were very proud to have continue their traditions of athletics. There was a soccer field that was on the campus. They also taught them American baseball and basketball. And they had a rivalry game of soccer at a soccer tournament held every year where they would bring in rival Camp Concordia, and they'd have a rivalry soccer matches at Atlanta or Concordia, and they would have a radio host going and reading in out, and they'd have a radio broadcast at the rival camp, whoever was hosting or whoever was away. And I'm painting this as a very jovial thing, but also, step back and think like this is by design. They really wanted to propagandize in a way to bring these guys. They celebrated birthdays. Some of the guys were confectionaries back home. They had a sand volleyball pit. They actually had a sand volleyball tournament at one point that was between officers and inmates. I don't want to know how that went. I think that is hilarious. This is a picture of our gallery that we have. These are all paintings and sculptures and that were done by German captured POWs while they were at the camp. And then, of course, Thomas Negley's art gallery. One of my favorite paintings by Negley is Defiance at the Gate, where it shows there was a riot at Camp Atlanta at one point, a prisoner riot. And you're like, these guys are getting treated so well. What happened? Well, their main complaint was they were being treated for inhumane conditions related to the food that they were being forced to eat. The camp guards had the audacity to feed them sweet corn because sweet corn is hog's feed, and they would never put themselves down to eating hog feed. And so the camp guards like, fine, we'll lock it up. You guys are on a food and water diet until either you relent or 2 weeks goes by, whichever comes first. Well, a couple days in, they're like, okay, fine. And so they they had sweet corn on the menu for the couple of weeks there, and I think a lot of them got a liking to it over time. So I do know of two instances where there was deaths There was a very unfortunate situation where a soccer ball got kicked up and over a fence, and the officer that was manning the guard tower did not see the soccer ball, and the POW going to retrieve it was shot in the back and died. And so it was kind of it was still a prison, at the end of the day, and that was something that I think, if it was me, it would be very re I'd reflect a lot back on that, if that was something that I saw. And so one of the unique things too, I'm going to go back to, pardon me, isometric here. So when I said they had the receiving barracks up front, so that was also where the infirmary was. So like I said, these guys were coming in off of a train, off of a boat. A lot of the times they might have wounds or anything that need to be readdressed or anything, or if they might have gotten sick on the way. And they could, get through and get cleaned up and everything. But one important thing that they did every single time is they separated out that what they started to recognize is over the time there's some infighting at the camp. Some of the prisoners were getting into fights, and to the point where a couple of them actually were seriously injured. And so what ended up happening is they started recognizing and watching, like, when do these fights happen. And so early on, what they found out is they had to separate out the by age. They had some that were they separated them out if they were under the age of 18, and they put them into some camps on one side. They were over the age, they would sit them in the other side. And the reason they would do this is they found out that the older generations, now that they didn't have an authoritarian boot over their shoulder, they could actually say and think a little bit more honestly. And the younger generation that grew up in the Hitler Youth, that were very exposed to the Nazi ideology, found them as a traitor to the nation. And so what they recognized is they kind of needed a camp that let some of the younger generation come up to speed, maybe ones that need a little bit more of a talking to and a little bit more of figuring things out and getting settled down to being in America. When then the older generation, they could kick out to the general population. And so that was something they recognized early on too. And um, yeah, go through my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I think that's a lot of the story. It's been really cool in my job is that I've been able to listen into some of the really cool oral histories of different people that walked in. We had this one gal that she remembered, she was a young girl at the time when her family had POWs that came to their farm, and she always would remember that they would exchange gifts with the farmer, with her parents, and they would have different, like, things that she had a wood carving that one of the POWs had done that they give to her. And then her mom, she would make pies and leave it out for them and try and do that. And once one of the prisoners are saying, oh, I can't eat here. And she goes, well, no, if you're good enough to work in our fields, you're good enough to eat at our table. And so I think that's that Nebraska nice kind of a deal that still coming through. And yeah, generally not getting too far in the weeds of the politics of it all, but I think a lot of this was, not too far removed were some of these Germans that were both prisoners of war that were also some of the settlers of some of the communities that were these farms. So the cultures might have been a little bit similar here and there in some instances. Especially in the back of my head, I'm always thinking like the internment camp, the Japanese internment camps. We're still 1940s America. Um, but like I said, okay, backing up a little bit though too, is like the main intention was for to that the war was going to end, and these guys had to go back. And so they actually had an incentivization program to teach them American style civics. So they had civics lessons, they had English lessons, and they had just some civil, civil engineering lessons. Because what they recognized is as soon as the war is over, these guys go back. America wanted these guys to rebuild Germany in an American image. And so they wanted to basically create the next set of people that to run logistics to kind of help ease the burden from the Allies after World War II to so that when they do rebuild Germany, it's not they're not repeating the same mistakes that had happened. And so as soon as the World War II ended, all of the POWs were required to go back to wherever they came from. So whatever their port of order, so like where they the town in which they conscripted or were conscripted to the military service, that's the town that they had to return to, and they had an ally post that they had to report to. After World War II, they had about 2 years of reparations in which they went around and rebuilt infrastructure that was damaged during World War II. And that's the ones that were lucky enough to be reporting back to a post that was under Allied occupation. If they were unfortunate to be under a Soviet occupied post, I I don't there's let's just say there's not really good history of what happened to them. And so they rebuilt, and then fast forwarding to the art gallery. We currently have so Thomas Nagley. Nagley was a German English interpreter. I think I mentioned he was at Camp Atlanta for most of his service, and he came to the United States with his family after first going to school in England. So he that's where he learned. You know, he grew up with German. His family has a long lineage of artists. And with the rise of kind of authoritarianism and anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic rhetoric of the Nazi party, this family kind of left Germany to the United Kingdom, and then from the United Kingdom to the United States, where he spent some time in New York City. Then the outbreak of World War II, he was drafted into military service to become a German English interpreter. And so he spent that time at the camp systems. And while he was there, I love the way he says it too. He goes like, "Oh, I was there, I was doing less and less like interpreting." And I'm like, I was just kind of bored. So I just started sketching and drawing and painting. And some of the officers liked what I was doing. And so they wanted portraits of themselves. And so Nagley started to create these different ones, paintings then. And I love his artistic style. He wanted to add color, and color not just in the palette, but also color in the characters, because he saw all of these different people that he interacted with as characters, and he wanted to create the reflect the atmosphere that was at the camp as well as he could in painting, because at the time it was only being able to be captured in black and white. And so it really throws in an actual spirit of the POW system as it existed through his art. He about 80% of the collection that he had done was actually done in the 90s when it was getting close to the 50th anniversary of World War II. He went back and revisited. So he went back and he retouched up some of the original paintings they did. And his original paintings in the preservation side is actually kind of a mess, because he would use any scrap wood he would find to paint on. And so the woods and that they're different. And then when he in the 90s, he went back through and did a lot on canvas and a lot on different other media. So he in the 90s and that, and then they hosted here in Nebraska at our museum 50th anniversary of Camp Atlanta. And so they had a reunion. They had Germans and that came from Germany back to the United States to their POW camp 50 years later. And again, I think that just goes to show, like, you go and do a 50-year class reunion because you had fond memories or friendships that you forged in high school. I don't think there's anybody that like American POWs that want to go back to Guam or anywhere else. Like it really was a light event that again it was a jovial event, or it was something that was fondly remembered, and it was by design, because now they went back home and they had fond memories of America, and they thought, and everything. So that's kind of the rundown of the Camp Atlanta system. um I go through things I think really quickly, but then I also reflect back and I'm like, yeah, I had some gaffes here or there. But is there anything that I could clarify on, or is there any other questions, or I'll hand it back over to Scott?
Well, actually, I'll start with the questions. When Nagel, like as far as you said, a lot of the work was from the early 90s. Was it all based on just his memories, or did he have a sketchbook, or how did that all his artwork come about?
Good question. I think that he had some existing pieces for like a frame of reference, but I also think a lot of the new additions that he had done in the 90s were probably off of memories or off of photos, to my
And
knowledge.
was he professionally an artist, or was this a hobby?
Well, entire family. He has like I think he told me, and when I called him, he has like 7 generations of artists going back to the like to some like archdukes and stuff like that, doing portraits for like portraitures for back in like the 1500s, something like that.
And he's currently still alive, correct?
To my knowledge, we had correspondence as of last summer here, so he's 102, I think now.
And do you know, I mean, was he, I mean, obviously he's very elderly, but how long was he still active as like, are there other other works of his that you've,
Yes. Um, so a little history on the art gallery that he did for World War II. That was featured at the Met in New York City for an extended exhibition. Now you got me on it, second guessing myself, Scott. Exhibit, exhibit. Oh my gosh,
exhibition?
It's an
exhibition.
exhibition.
Thank you. You got me
There we
rolling on
go.
that one. And it was on an extended one there, and then just remembering the Camp Atlanta system in World War II, and he got to be good friends with the local historian here, Glenn Thompson. And Glenn Thompson convinced Negley to donate his collection, that gallery, after it was down from the Met, and so we permanently have it out here, and now it's on exhibition again. So.
And is it I mean, my understanding is that this is the first time it has left the gallery. Are there other places that you think it's going to be exhibited in the near future?
This is where Jennifer Garza, she approached me with a zany idea at one of our Nebraska Museums Association conferences, and I'm like, I've never thought about that, and so I had to go into the logistics of everything and trying to figure that out, and kind of I talked to Thomas a couple of times to get his weigh in on it, and he thought it was a good idea, so we went with it.
Are there other questions on this? And if you haven't seen the exhibit, please come and see it. Jill, please go ahead.
Yes. And I don't want to take away from Nagel's artwork and the exhibit, but I do have a question in regards to the German prisoners of war, as they were assimilating into these rural communities and into central Nebraska. Um, First question, how were they accepted by the locals? And secondly, uh, how did we, and I say we loosely, how did they, um, maybe it would be those in charge, the Army, the Corps of Engineers, whatever it may be, how did they protect for not having their Nazi idealisms, influence Nebraskans at that time?
Yes. The not so going back the first part, when the United States Army Corps of Engineers were very hush hush about the entire operation as it was being built, and of course, small town America, the rumor mill was absolutely crazy. There's so many headlines of like letters to the editor, like "What's the U.S. Army building out there? What are they doing?" And people were really kind of getting worried about it. The sentiment at the time was that they were building a camp for conscientious observers or draft dodgers, and so they were like, "Oh, we don't want any, of these unpatriotic heathens next door to where we're at." And that was the biggest worry at the time. And then all of a sudden they start coming out and they're speaking German, and everybody's like, "Oh my goodness, like we have Nazis next door." And then they, do their thing for a while as far as building the camp out, and they start servicing the farms, and then everybody's like, okay, they're fine. They had very supervised every single instance in which they had civilian contact. It was supervised, meaning that it was very heavily curated from the United States Army. We got to step back. This 1940s America. This is wartime America. The propaganda machine of the United States was very, very prevalent. The newsletters and the radio broadcasts and things that the Germans were getting were actually created by intelligence officers with the intent to persuade the POWs why they were here, as an example. And so the propaganda arm of the United States was just in full force to really combat uh, um, any sort of like Nazi rhetoric having an influence. Also, the biggest elephant in the room is the language barrier. They kind of had to go through a translator, and so that one of my favorite, and going to the protections style, one of my favorite paintings by Nagel. I would say Nagel. He's not corrected me in any of our correspondence, so I'm going to say Nagel or Nagel. But if we interchangeably, but one of my favorite paintings by him is "You're in America Now" is the title of it, and it was because one of the German English interpreters, I don't know if it's Thomas himself, if he's projecting an experience that he had, but one of the German officers would not let a Jew tell him what orders to do. It's like camp officers like, no, you're in America. These officers are coming from me through his mouth. And he's like, well, I'm not taking orders from him. He's a Jew. And so that there was some frictions. And so it really was the United States officers that were there to enforce and say, no, we got a translator. You got to deal with it. Like I'm not speaking German here. Like, so you've got to find somebody that can to work with you, because they're here to help you, not the other way around. I'm not here to help you. They are. So I think, does that kind of answer your question a little bit? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I was really curious about that.
Other questions? Please come off mute. What do you think the purpose of his, other than memory, what did Nagel want to come out of this exhibit?
Um, we have a good interview with him and Glenn, and in it he says that like you said, he wanted to provide a sense of color where the world was only being captured in black and white. So I think he wanted to show the light-spirited nature of the Camp Atlantis system as he experienced it, because he definitely, outside of his, he does a really funny review of the unappealing PWs that they had to paint very crudely on all of the uniforms. And so he wanted to make sure that there was at least some artistic representation from the camp systems that he was employed in. But yeah, that's the biggest thing, I think, is just he wanted to make sure that it added colorful characters that he saw and experienced while he was at the camp, and wanted to try and translate that to a wider audience. And in his words, cartoonish. He wanted to add a cartoonish light nature to it.
Has his work been compared to any other artist? What I'm actually alluding to is it's very Norman Rockwell-ish.
I could see that. I could see that. This is where history major here, maybe slight architectural historian in a past life, but as far as art and art history, I chose to avoid those subjects. uh, but no, yeah, Thomas is a great guy. Love talking with him, getting to know him and his daughter. We have an art book that is also for sale. So if you want, we can either ship one, or the JFO has them for sale and purchase there. It has all the captions. So in the newest edition of this art book, all of the captions were wrote and edited by Thomas. And so if you want to see some of his more, he talks more into it about his experiences, his influences, and talk a little bit more about the gallery itself. A lot of that's in that book.
And if you'd like to see the book, it's on display with where the paintings are in the Eisenberg Gallery.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. The exhibit is wonderful. Again, I'd like to thank the Nebraska Jewish Historical Society for bringing this working with you and bringing this exhibit here. We're looking forward on Sunday. We have a workshop with teachers and some others who have signed up. If you're interested in coming to it, it's at 1 p.m. in Wiseman. But if you email me this afternoon, I can send you the registration link for it. It's from 1 to 3:30, and there'll also be a walkthrough of the exhibit. And next month on the 20th, we have we have an exhibit next month in the Eisenberg Gallery of the artwork of Holocaust survivor Sophia Davidson, and it's been curated by Suzanne Horwich, our friend Suzanne Horwich, and also the granddaughter of Sophia Davidson, and they'll both be presenting on the exhibit at our Lunch and Learn. So I look forward to seeing you. Thank you all again for being here, and hope to see you all soon. So thank you again.